And on the world today, Israel orders 1.1 million people in Gaza to move to southern regions in 24 hours. Hamas calls it fake propaganda, saying no one should move. Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian visits Lebanon, meets with Hezbollah leader on Israel-Hamas war. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Susan Ilian. Israel is warning approximately 1.1 million people in Gaza City to relocate to southern part of the Strip in the next 24 hours for safety ahead of an unexpected ground offensive. However, Hamas says no one should move, describing Israel's order for people in the north of Gaza as fake propaganda, and has urged citizens there to ignore it. The United Nations say this order is impossible for Palestinians to fully comply and is calling on Israel to withdraw the order. Fearing for their safety, people in Gaza City have been packing up and moving from their homes, trying to get to safety. Among those are children. Nearly half of Gaza's 2 million residents are under 18. And this order comes as a ground offensive looms. In the meantime, Hamas and Hezbollah have called for an anti-Israel rally today across the Arab and Islamic world. The demonstrations are expected in Iraq, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Jordan. Thousands of demonstrators have already gathered in Iraq, Jordan, and Indonesia, and protests are also expected at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem after Friday prayers. The World Health Organization has called for immediate humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip, warning Israel's blockade and bombardment have left the enclave's health system at a breaking point. Gaza's overstretched hospitals has only a few hours of electricity a day, with fuel being rationed to maintain critical services, including intensive care and X-ray and dialysis services. The United Nations Health Agency calls for the opening of a humanitarian corridor to allow health workers into the territory, as well as the evacuation of the sick and injured. It says shortages of medical supplies are also severe, and time is running out to prevent a humanitarian disaster in a territory that is home to more than 2 million people. As the conflict continues, multiple rockets were seen being launched from Gaza on Friday amid an ongoing conflict between the Palestinian militant group Hamas and Israel. Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, claimed to have fired 150 rockets into southern Israel, targeting Ashkelon. Contrails left by the rockets were seen streaked over buildings in Gaza before white clouds of smoke appeared in the sky. And joining us is Ilan Mizrahi, a former Mossad official and former national security advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining us, Ilan. Let me ask you my first question. Give us an idea, how intense are the Hamas attacks in Israel today?
First of all, good evening. The attacks are intense when talking about launching missiles to Israel. It's not only to the near settlements near Gaza Strip, but to all the territory of Israel. They try also to launch missiles to the north, and they failed. But it is an intensive attack of missiles.
And the Israeli military, we understand, has been discovering more dead bodies in Israel from the Hamas attacks. But there's so much information online, some true, some fake. how can we tell? Can you help us decipher which is real?
First of all, it's not only Hamas. There were those who attacked our villages and small towns were Hamas members, were PIJ members, which is Palestinian Islamic Jihad organization. Both of these are under Iranian, let's say, directed. And there's only a Palestinian mob which follows them into the Israeli villages and kibbutzim. So it's not only Hamas. Behind these two organizations, you have the Iranians. As a matter of fact, the attack was planned several months ago in Beirut with Iranian Hamas Hezbollah members. Now to the number of Israeli citizens which were assassinated, decapitated, burned are now around 1,000, but the process of identifying all of those who already died is not finished. The process is going on. So it might be more than the around 1,000 that I just mentioned. It's 100% that this is the number. No fake news here. We never played with the numbers of our citizens that were killed by terror attacks or during the war. You have to remember that in these attacks, there were around 20 Israeli kibbutzim, what we call kibbutz, and small cities. So you have a very, very great number of citizens. We know today that in several places, 1/4 of the civilians of that kibbutz or that small city were assassinated, and as I said, children were burned after they make them witness how their parents are killed. Others were decapitated. This is more ISIS way of dealing with their enemies, and I see a lot of similarities between Hamas in this attack and ISIS. And by the way, just to show or to tell you some examples, there were flags of Daesh or our kibbutzim and cities. We found there also instruction booklets of ISIS, of Daesh, with those terrorists of Hamas and PIJ. The call to the Arab and Muslim world to a day of wrath, as they called it, came from the leadership of Hamas and the leadership of Daesh. So let's
I
not
wanted
forget
to ask
it,
you, I wanted
that,
to elaborate, Mr.
you already
Ilan.
know.
My first question was your advice on how to decipher between real and fake, and you are giving us accounts of things that we also have heard we're not sure of. So you mentioned burnt babies and beheaded children as well, and that has been confirmed.
Didn't say beheading children. I said burned children,
Yes.
Beheaded other civilians. I didn't say beheaded
burnt babies.
Children. No,
Yes.
I did not.
Yeah, burnt
So
babies.
let's be precise.
Yeah. And those are confirmed.
About the number I already mentioned.
Yes.
Today, it is 100% sure
Yes.
Around 1,000, and the process is not finished yet.
So it's 1,000 and possibly counting, but the facts are that it's 1,000 as it stands. And Mr. Ilan, some people are currently living in bunkers right now in some parts of Israel because of these attacks. Like, what plans are there to ensure the safety of others?
It's not bunkers. We have in almost every apartment and every house in Israel what we call the safe room. This safe room was planned to give shelter during missiles attacks. And so the instructions are that whenever the citizens will hear the sirens, then they have to rush to the safe house. You have the safe house in the apartments, you have a kind of shelters in streets and several places in every city or every kibbutz or farm. So they will go in there, and after several minutes after the siren, they are out. They can go out. So it's not bunkers, it's safe room. Now,
Okay.
so
Yes.
it is in Israel all over. So
Yes.
citizens which are obedient to the instructions which are coming from the IDF, the Israeli army, if they follow it, they will be safe. In this place, in the Negev, around Gaza Strip, the problem was that, as I said, the shelters, the safe rooms, were only to defend them from missiles, not from attacks by terrorists.
Okay.
So there was, in most of the cases, the terrorists just opened from outside the door of the safe house and killed the citizens who were there.
And Israeli Defense Forces are preparing to launch ground offensive against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. When is this expected to begin?
No. And as I said, even if I knew, I would not say it. I will not talk about it. I can talk about the attack. I can talk about how.
I can ask you my next question
who is
then.
behind. Please.
Thank you. The Israeli military has appealed to people in northern Gaza to evacuate. So we have heard, and they have just a window of opportunity to do so, approximately 24 hours, which may have already started. Where are they expected to go?
The south of Gaza Strip.
And they would make it there in time with the warning and the amount of people that would be traveling?
Why don't you ask the Egyptians to open the doors for them, that they will be able to leave for the Egyptian territory, Sinai?
Do you anticipate they would do so?
Sorry?
Do you anticipate that they would do so?
I'm not sure. I don't think that they would like to have Palestinian citizens, which among them there must be, I don't know how much, but Hamas and PIJ terrorists. I don't think that the Egyptian will agree, but try there.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ilan Mizrahi. Appreciate you very much for being on the program.
It's an answer to all of your questions. I know that what happened in last Saturday was another Holocaust for us. The brutal way of Hamas and PIJ to our citizens is only one. We consider it as another Holocaust. I never dreamed that such an organization will act exactly as Daesh. But Daesh and Hamas are just the same.
Thank you
Don't
very much, Mr. Mizrahi. Appreciate you very much with all your information. Thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met President of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, in Jordan as U.S. officials fan out across the region. President Abbas, who is based in the West Bank, is a political rival to Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip. Mr. Blinken also met with Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman after arriving there earlier today. It's the second stop of his most extensive Middle East tour yet, as Israel prepares for a sweeping ground offensive in Gaza. Now, the top U.S. diplomat seeking to stop spillover from the war also planned to visit key allies, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, some with influence on Hamas, an Islamic group backed by Iran. Yesterday, Mr. Blinken was in Israel for talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Today, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in Tel Aviv and has met with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In the meantime, Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian has discussed Israel's war against Hamas with the head of the powerful Tehran-backed Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, which has launched its own cross-border attacks on Israel. Amir Abdollahian, who arrived in Beirut late on Thursday, said he had met Hezbollah leader Sayed Hassan Nasrallah, as well as Lebanon's caretaker, Prime Minister Najib Mikati, and caretaker Foreign Minister Abdullah Bouhabib. Local media outlet Al Mayadeen says the Iranian minister and Nasrallah had discussed Hamas's attack on Israel. Iran also supports Hamas and has lauded the group's attack on Israel, but has denied any involvement. Hezbollah exchanged fire with Israel across the border this week, and Israel responded by striking an observation post belonging to the group, as well as Lebanese villages, in the most serious escalation since the 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel. Amir Abdollahian told reporters on Friday that Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza, adding that Iran had asked Egypt, which borders Gaza, the United Nations, and aid groups to allow it to send humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Amir Abdollahian is due in Syria later, a day after Israeli airstrikes put the airports of Damascus and Aleppo out of service. Tension is mounting on the Israel-Lebanon border as Israeli troops, tanks, and vehicles have been deployed and are on standby. This is the seventh day of war with Hamas that expanded to include the northern borders with Lebanon, with whose Hezbollah group Israel has traded barbs with continuously during the war. Human Rights Watch is accusing Israel of using white phosphorus ammunitions in its military operations in Gaza and Lebanon, saying the use of such weapons puts civilians at risk of serious and long-term injury. However, Israel's military is denying the allegations, but the Human Rights Watch insists it has verified videos taken in Lebanon showing multiple airbursts of artillery-fired white phosphorus over two rural locations along the Israel-Lebanon border. Welcome back. Canada says it supports Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said this, condemning Palestinian group Hamas for taking hostages during its incursion last weekend. The country is supplying an initial 10 million Canadian dollars in humanitarian assistance to Israel and Gaza, and is deploying a unit of officials who are trained to help during times of emergencies.
Canada supports Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and it does not represent the Palestinian people or the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people, and it does not represent Arabs or Muslims. Israeli and Palestinian civilians deserve to live in peace, in security, in dignity, and with their human rights respected. Canada will be providing an initial $10 million in humanitarian assistance to address urgent needs in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. Israel has the right to defend itself in accordance with international law, and we continue to look for ways to support civilians in both Palestinian and Israelis, and ensure that as many civilians as possible are kept safe during this terrible conflict that is the responsibility and the fault of the terrorist organization known as Hamas. We are working very hard with all of our allies and friends and partners who want to see peace returned to the region, want to see civilian lives protected. This is an unbelievably difficult situation. But Hamas's decision to take hostages, to take innocent hostages, and to use them as pawns in a game of terror is absolutely unconscionable, and all must stand strongly against these horrific acts.
Prime Minister of Thailand, Srettha Thavisin, has met with Israeli Ambassador Orna Sagiv, urging for help to facilitate the repatriation of Thai citizens back home due to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Almost 6,000 Thai citizens have registered to return home, but evacuating them might take them as Thai nationals are scattered in various places in the region, hence the length of time. 41 evacuees, all laborers who had been working in Israel, were returned to Thailand on Thursday via a commercial flight, including 15 nationals prioritized by the Thai government due to their injuries and because they were living in high-risk zones. According to the Thai government, the death toll of Thai citizens in Israel rose to 21 on Thursday, with 16 taken hostage and 14 wounded. Thailand is one of the largest sources of migrant workers in Israel, with up to 30,000 working in the agricultural sector. Meanwhile, the chief cabinet secretary in Japan, Hirokazu Matsuno, says a charter flight will transport Japanese citizens out of Israel, as one plane is set to depart Tel Aviv for Dubai this Saturday. Matsuno adds that the Japanese government would keep monitoring the situation and take appropriate measures to ensure the safety of Japanese nationals to return home. According to Japan's Foreign Ministry office, as of October 9, there are approximately 1,300 Japanese citizens in Israel and Palestinian territories. And joining us now is Miko Peled, a prominent Israeli-American activist, renowned author, and dedicated human rights advocate. Hailing from the heart of Jerusalem, we delve into some pretty pressing issues today. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C., Miko. I want to start with my first question. How would you describe what you are hearing from Israel and Gaza with regards to the situation on the ground? What have you heard thus far?
Well, thank you for inviting me to the show. Before I start, I have to say I'm really disappointed that an African channel would demonstrate such a pro-apartheid perspective. The speaker before me, a war criminal, former Mossad operative, was lying through his teeth, presenting the apartheid regime's perspective on this issue. I wish you had asked him how many babies Israel burns every time they drop tons of bombs on civilians in the Gaza Strip. You know, if he's really concerned about babies when bodies being burnt, that is really the concern, because they're Israel murders by the thousands, and as they continue to do even today. You know, what we've seen is Palestinian fighters come out of the Gaza Strip, a concentration camp with over 2 million people that have been locked up in a concentration camp since the 1950s. So this is something that's been going on for decades. impoverished because of the apartheid regime, the Israeli apartheid regime, as a result of the brutal ethnic cleansing that they had gone through. And since all of the Palestinian attempts to find some kind of a resolution to their plight peacefully, and there are decades and decades of efforts that have been made by Palestinians, they took up arms and they put together what, by any analyst, even by Israeli generals' opinions, was a brilliant military operation. It was a justified, well-planned, well-executed military operation by a people who have been, again, enclosed in a concentration camp, over 2 million people, to go out and do two things. Number one, take prisoners so that they can negotiate the release of thousands of Palestinian political prisoners being held by the apartheid regime of Israel. And they took over what used to be Palestinian land. I mean, these Israeli settlements have all been built on the ashes of Palestinian towns, Palestinian villages, and so forth. So again, I have to say, coming from especially from Africa, that has suffered from apartheid and has suffered and knows how terrible settler colonialism is, and continue from Israeli abuse and Israeli support of some of the worst dictators in Africa, it's really surprising that an African broadcasting channel and African states still maintain relations and support the state of Israel instead of what they used to do traditionally, which is support the Palestinian cause for justice and freedom.
Thank you for expressing that. My next question to you is, 1.1 million Gazans right now are trying to flee for their lives to the southern region after Israel's evacuation order. Could you speak to the humanitarian situation that this is causing?
Israel is perpetrating war crime after war crime after war crime. Now they're asking over 1 million people to be evacuated in 24 hours. And again, the previous speaker, the war criminal from the Mossad, was saying, well, it's their problem. We don't know. They should go to the south. We're talking about families. We're talking about children. We're talking about destruction. We're talking about why in the world should these people, many of whom are already refugees from other parts of Palestine, get up and leave? Because Israel wants to come in with its tank and flatten the city of Gaza and flatten the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And I just want to mention the whole idea, the Gaza Strip is not something that is historically known to have existed. It is a prison that was created by Israel in the 1950s because it needed a place to push the refugees who became refugees as a result of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. So now they want the people of Gaza and the people that live in the northern part of that prison to just get up and go. We're talking about 1 million people so that Israel can continue to bomb and continue to destroy, and the international community stands silent as these war crimes, these crimes against humanity are being perpetrated against men and women and children, against civilians. I'll remind the listeners too, there's never been a Palestinian army. So we're talking about all civilians except for small groups of guerrilla fighters. So this is a humanitarian catastrophe of an unbelievable at an unbelievable level, and the United Nations and the Europeans and the Africans and the Arabs are all standing still and watching this happen. I do not understand why the African countries don't kick out the Israeli ambassadors, why the Arabs don't kick out the ones that have relations with Israel. The Europeans, what are they waiting for? The war criminal from the Mossad talked about a Holocaust. We are seeing a Holocaust in front of our very eyes, and nobody is standing up. This is a humanitarian catastrophe of unbelievable proportions, and the entire world is standing still. 1 million people have to get up and go because the Israeli army wants to come in and destroy more. And by the way, they don't dare come in while the Palestinians are there because they know that the Palestinian fighters are braver and far superior to the Israeli fighters. And they know that because they've experienced this in 2014. When the Israeli army puts boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip, they get hit very hard by the Palestinians. So they want to rid the entire area of Palestinians so that they can bring their troops and their tanks in. This is absolute madness. It's absolute madness.
Miko, the Human Rights Watch is accusing Israel's use of white phosphorus ammunitions in its military operations in Gaza and in Lebanon. White phosphorus, I'm sure you know, is a wax-like toxic substance that does damage to the human skin. However, Israel is denying this, even though we have reported that there is proof of it. Looking at the modus operandi of previous conflicts, how accurate could this be? How should the international community respond? Can you speak on that?
Israel has been using phosphorus for decades. This is nothing new. You know, I was a soldier in the Israeli army. My father was a general in the Israeli military. Israel has been using phosphorus for decades. Decades. I know from people who saw their loved ones being burned alive, burnt and unable to help them because the phosphorus enters the body and there's no way to quell it. There's no way to stop the burning. And again, the war criminal you had before from the Mossad talked about the burning of babies and burning of bodies. Do you know what happens when the phosphorus hits babies and hits young children and hits civilians? Israel has been using phosphorus for decades. Israel has been spitting in the face of international law and human decency for decades, and they're using, this is nothing new. Of course they're using phosphorus. They use phosphorus all the time. They use many forms of weapons that are deemed illegal. But the entire operation is illegal, so what do they care about? Phosphorus is not the problem. The bombing is the problem. The demolition of these apartment buildings after apartment buildings, entire neighborhoods, the killing of thousands of civilians that, by the way, has been going on for decades. This is the problem. The problem is not this particular weapon or that particular weapon or this particular operation. It's a strategic ethnic cleansing. It's a strategic genocide of the Palestinian people. And once again, I'll say the world is standing silent, including the Africans, including the Europeans, including the Muslim countries, are standing and watching idly by as we're seeing a genocide. Again, I'll say, he talked about a Holocaust. Israel is perpetuating a Holocaust against the Palestinian people. As we sit here and speak, while we are speaking, this is going on, and no international body is putting an end to it. No international body is demanding sanctions. No international body is sending the Israeli ambassadors home and demanding action. Nobody. They're allowing these people to die only because they're Palestinian.
My final question to you, Miko, and I asked this to the former Mossad official, Mr. Mizrahi. There's a lot of misinformation out there. How do we know what is fake and what is real?
Well, we know that there was an operation. We don't know the details. There are many details that we're not going to know for a very long time. But we do know that there was a very dedicated, very disciplined operation that came out of Gaza with Palestinian fighters, and we do know that for decades Israel has been violating international law and violating human decency by keeping over 2 million people in a concentration camp and on a regular basis bombing and killing them, and then saying it's their fault. So that much we know. We know enough to act. We know enough to act against Israel. We know enough in order to end the violence against Palestinians. We know enough to know what is right and what is wrong. And we know particularly, and again, I'll say this to Africans. Africans know settler colonialism, and they know apartheid, and they know the violence that comes with this. Israel has raised the bar in terms of the violence, in terms of the brutality and the savagery that they are executing against the Palestinians to unprecedented levels. And so that much we know. So we can already act in terms of what we know the Israelis are doing. We know they're murdering babies. We know they're murdering children. We know they're burning innocent civilians with their bombs and their phosphorus. And again, they've been doing it for decades, and the world is silent. So that much we know. What specifically happened to the Israelis, to a particular settlement, in a particular fight, we don't know yet, and we're not going to know for a while. But we do know enough to act against the perpetrator of the violence and the perpetrator of the crimes.
All right, thank you so very much, Miko Peled. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And people around the world are holding vigils and rallies in support of Israel after the mass murders by Hamas at the weekend. Some 2,000 people gathered for a joint vigil on Thursday evening in Munich, Germany, to show solidarity with Israel. Bavarian Premier Markus Söder joined Charlotte Knobloch, president of the Jewish community of Munich and Upper Bavaria, on Munich's St. Jacob's Square, reiterating Germany's stance that the country stood by Israel. A minute's silence was held, as well as a rendition of the Israeli national anthem. According to the German media, there was a heightened police presence at the peaceful event of some 150 officers. The organizers of the event, the IKG, the Israelite cultural community in Bavaria, are the largest community in Germany, with around 9,500 members. In the meantime, the first government-chartered Lufthansa plane from Tel Aviv touched down in Frankfurt on Thursday as relieved passengers were greeted with hugs and tears from family and friends. The 371-person capacity flight was one of two Lufthansa planes organized for German citizens leaving Israel on Thursday. According to the German Foreign Ministry, that same day, some 950 German citizens were evacuated from Israel by land, air, and sea in transport organized by the military. And joining us now is Deutsche Welle's Cassandra Sundt in Berlin for more on how Germany is backing its ally, Israel, in the region. Welcome to the program, Cassandra. Chancellor Olaf Scholz delivered a big speech on German support for Israel on Thursday. Talk to us about the details of the speech and what he had to say.
That's right. The speech in front of the German parliament was clear. The German leader said that the only place for Germany right now is, quote, side by side with Israel. Scholz pointed to the over 1,000 citizens of Israel that have been killed in these, quote, terror attacks, and the thousands more that have been injured. Scholz pointed out that in a country like Israel, with only 9 million people, it's very likely that nearly everyone in the country knows someone who has been affected. The chancellor has said all Hamas activities in Germany would be banned and that authorities would prosecute anyone involved in such activities. The pro-Palestinian group Samidouan would also be outlawed. Scholz's governing coalition, as well as the main opposition party in parliament, have submitted a motion for a resolution that calls for Israel to be given, quote, full solidarity and all support. Scholz said on Thursday that, quote, the safety in Israel and for Israel must be restored, and that is why Israel must have the capacity to defend itself.
Well, Cassandra, meanwhile, Germany has started evacuating German citizens out of Israel. What's the status of that operation?
That's right. Germany is working to repatriate citizens. At least 5,000 German citizens have registered to leave Israel, according to the German Foreign Ministry. And Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said the government evacuated 17 school classes from Israel. 4 flights were planned for today and yesterday via Lufthansa, the first of which evacuated over 370 German nationals. The airline Condor also said it was going to operate 2 flights to get German citizens out of Israel as well. It seems like further flights are in the works. The ministry noted it was working to create further exit options by, quote, by plane, by bus, or by ship.
Well, then, what kind of material support is Germany offering Israel?
Israel has asked Germany for ammunition for its warships, according to German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius on Thursday. Pistorius said he is in talks with Israeli partners to learn more about the details of that request. Germany has already committed to providing medical equipment and will allow Israel to use 2 military drones stationed in the region. Turning again briefly to the Foreign Minister's office, Annalena Baerbock has arrived in Israel today, according to the Foreign Office in Berlin. She follows her counterparts from the U.S. and UK who are also in the region this week. There has been a flurry of diplomatic activity to prevent the Israel-Hamas conflict from spiraling into a regional war. Before she departed, Baerbock outlined that, quote, solidarity is a top priority for us. She really underlined that Israeli security is a German state policy and that it is, quote, our very first task. Baerbock added that exchanges were underway about continuing humanitarian aid for Palestinians.
Welcome back. Protests from Japan's Muslim community have staged a protest near the Israeli embassy in Tokyo on Friday afternoon in support of Gaza and the Palestinian people. Participants in the main protest, which took place a block away from the Israeli embassy, held signs and chanted slogans like Israel, terrorist, and free Palestine for over 2 hours. In separate news conferences addressing the conflict on Friday, the Palestinian envoy to Japan called for Tokyo to continue providing humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza, while the Israeli ambassador to Japan said Jerusalem had the right to defend itself. Japan calls for a political solution to allow Israel and a future independent Palestinian state to coexist, has provided $2.3 billion of assistance to Palestinians over the last decade, according to a foreign minister document.
And I plea for the Japanese to continue on a humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. I do believe that Japan is a neutral and can continue on playing a neutral rule between the Palestinians and the Israelis. I don't think that America, the United States, can play that role anymore.
And I hope that Japan will continue to stand by us at the Security Council and bilaterally and acknowledge the right to defend ourselves, as Japan has the right to defend itself against terrorism.
Meanwhile, in New York, pro-Israeli protesters took to the streets for a vigil and rally titled "New York Stands with Israel" in the city. At the rally, participants of a counter-protest were present. Also, Jewish opponents of Israel were seen with signs reading "Judaism condemns the state of Israel and its atrocities."
We are not all right when we see young girls pulled from their home and dragged through the streets. We are not all right when we see grandmothers being pulled away from their homes and children shot in front of their families. We are not all right when right here in the city of New York you have those who celebrate at the same time when the devastation is taking place in our city.
Yes, we are called upon to pray for peace. But justice first. There must be justice for the slaughter of babies and children and grandmothers and families torn apart by the horror of what happened to their loved ones.
Speaking to supporters in Florida, former U.S. President Donald Trump has disclosed for the first time that Israel decided at the last minute not to take part in the U.S. assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, killed in Iraq in a drone strike on January 3rd, 2020, which was ordered by Trump. Trump also blasted President Joe Biden during a campaign event, saying America's enemies were taking advantage of Biden's administration. His comments came as he was weighing in on the deadly attacks on Israel by Hamas.
Israel was going to do this with us, and it was being planned and working on it for months, and now we had everything all set to go. And the night before it happened, I got a call that Israel will not be participating in this attack. So let's do it. And he came onto the plane, and we followed him right from the Situation Room. We followed the whole thing, and about 15 seconds later, it was all over, and we did it. But I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down. That was a very terrible thing, I will say that. So we were disappointed by that, very disappointed, but we did the job ourselves, and it was absolute precision, magnificent, beautiful job. And then Bibi tried to take credit for it. That wasn't good. That didn't make me feel too good, but that's all right. So they got to strengthen themselves up.
U.S. Representative Steve Scalise, who Republicans nominated to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives, has dropped out of the race as the party failed to resolve its divisions, prolonging the leadership crisis in the chamber. Now, Scalise, the #2 House Republican, had secured his party's nomination to replace ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy, but was still short of the 217 votes needed to be elected on the House floor, as several of his fellow Republicans said they would not support him. Republicans control the House by a narrow 221 to 212 margin over Democrats. Whomever they choose to nominate in place of Scalise, they can afford no more than 4 party defections if they want to end the House leaderless state, which has lasted 9 days.
Hey, first, let me, I know we've been following this. It's been quite a journey, and there's still a long way to go. I just shared with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee. If you look at over the last few weeks, if you look at where our conference is, there's still work to be done. Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas, and I was very clear. We have to have everybody put their agendas on the side and focus on what this country needs. This country is counting on us to come back together. This House of Representatives needs a speaker, and we need to open up the House again. But clearly, not everybody is there, and there's still schisms that have to get resolved. I never came here for a title. I've had some great titles. I'm the majority leader of the House, and I love the job I have. I've had big challenges in my life. I've been tested in ways that really put perspective on life. Really, the 2017 shooting, when I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive, taught me what's important in life, and that's my family, my faith, and I'm blessed beyond belief. I have absolutely all the right perspective, and I still have a deep, deep passion for making sure we get our country back on track and get our conference fixed again. But there's some folks that really need to look in the mirror over the next couple of days and decide, are we going to get it back on track? Are they going to try to pursue their own agenda? You can't do both. And I think we're going to get there. I was very clear in that room that ultimately we have to come together for the country. But I never came here for titles, and it's much bigger than me, and it's much bigger than anybody else. And nobody's going to use me as an excuse to hold back our ability to get the House opened again. We still need to get a speaker. And I'm going to continue to push as hard as we can to make that happen as quickly as it has to happen. But it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen today. It wasn't going to happen tomorrow. It needs to happen soon.
And finally, comic book fans are descending on New York for the annual Comic-Con Festival. The 4-day event kicked off on Thursday and continues to be a safe place for nerds. Nearly 200,000 people are expected to attend the celebration of all things pop culture, from comic books to movies and television. Organizers say this year's focus is on horror content, with some spooky premieres expected to excite fans. Although the actors' strike continues, various actors will appear during the convention.
You know, we invited a couple of our closest friends over for a really chill party. It's about 200,000 of us over the next 4 days. It's a celebration of all things pop culture and comics. This is one of the best times of all year.
I always come every year. I've always been a nerd for my whole life, so this is a time I can actually express my nerdiness and not feel shame. Because when I was growing up, I had to hide it a lot because I wasn't cool back in the day.
Condiment King. It's I promise it's a real villain, Batman villain from the animated series. He shoots ketchup and mustard. It's dumb, and I love it.
Well, it went by pretty quick, you know, like, because they have a lot of people to get to. But it was awesome nonetheless, you know, just getting this opportunity.
SAG was wonderful and made sure that ahead of everything that they were doing to make sure that their message was getting across, they were working with conventions to determine how celebrities could still appear at our shows. So we're able to have Chris Evans in the building and Ewan McGregor in the building and still support them in the message that they're sending.
And that's it for The World Today. I'm Susan Ilian. Have a great weekend.